I'd like to introduce our next presenter tonight, Mr. Harvey McMurray, who spent 5 years as a police officer, went back to school, is now a doctoral candidate at Rutgers School of Criminal Justice, where he also serves as an adjunct assistant professor. Mr. McMurray is a member of the American Society of Criminology, National Association of Criminal Justice Planners. This past spring, he served an internship with the United Nations Committee of Crime Prevention and Control, and in 1983 was listed as one of the outstanding young men of America with the JC organization. Mr. McMurray's career plan is to become an international consultant in criminal justice, and his topic for us this evening is General Principles for a Crime-Free Society, a Baha'i Perspective. Mr. McMurray, please.
Aloha, friends. This is really very difficult to follow. First, a 5- and 6-year-old. It made me kind of wonder what I should have done at age 5 or 6, because I'm going to have to use my papers here. And when I was sitting there and I was listening to the previous presenters, I have spent this past week in New Jersey among the company of the so-called experts in the area of crime as part of a panel of the United Nations. And the purpose was to set an agenda on the topic of youth crime and justice. And I wish they were there. They would have really done us all a service. Throughout the international community, mankind is experiencing a wide range of problems such as racism, divorce, poverty, famine, drugs, and also crime. Alvin Toffler, in his book Third Wave, he speaks of these things as all being signs of a decaying civilization. But more ably, Baha'u'llah refers to these as birth pains of the New World Order. Some people have contended in the social sciences, such as Durkheim, that crime is in fact normal, and that crime is normal in that, as well as healthy in a society, because it sets the bounds from which one should or should not behave. The United Nations, in a statement, has said criminality exists in all countries, and that in many of them it has a pernicious effect, thereby impeding efforts to achieve more wholesome social and economic development. Taking into account the varying cultural and historical and social factors, it would not be reasonable for any attempt at a set of specific rules by which we can govern mankind, in that there are differences by culture and so forth. However, one might do well to, in fact, provide general principles by which society can be patterned and developed. Professor Jerome Hall has stated, serious thinking in any field of knowledge culminates in a search for an analysis of basic principles that compromise the foundations upon which the entire discipline rests. And this has been my attempt, in fact, in that of identifying 7 general principles which I think would prove worthy in that we may realize a crime-free society. Is that possible? No. It's a utopia in thought, but it's an approach that we must take in order for mankind to prosper. There has been some contentions, and I guess people have since formed a different opinion that one way of dealing with crime is to increase the quality of life. Obviously, that doesn't work. Therefore, what we need is a spiritual solution to the problem of crime. The inevitability of present systems of criminal justice has been acknowledged throughout the entire world. The United Nations Committee on Crime Prevention and Control, an organization which I have very, very high regards for, is about to convene its 7th Congress in 1985 in dealing with the crime problem on an international level. And while I agree with that, I support their activities, one must note one thing. The beloved Guardian said that it would be misleading to attempt comparison with that of the New World Order and those systems designed by man. Therefore, one can easily come to the conclusion that in order for there to be a salvation of mankind, it must be done on a spiritual basis, as per the manifestation of God. And this brings us to a paradox. Governments are being asked to deal with the crime problem when in fact the governments are part of the problem. And this is especially true in developing countries in which there is no real social stability whatsoever, corruption and so forth, as well as developed countries. Therefore, again, neither is a spiritual solution to the problem of crime. Religion has always been the primary source of law for the governance of mankind. In Hinduism, approximately 2500 BC, Hinduism provided the basis for Dharma, socially approved conduct. Hinduism, as I said, the Torah, and also the Quran, all of these holy books have served as a basis from which human conduct has been governed. But yet people or persons in that of academia have been reluctant to include religion into the academic debate. And I myself am guilty. You sit there talking, people look at you like you're crazy. But we can acknowledge that deficiency as part of the old world order. Now, as has been the tendency of God through his love for mankind, has again revealed the way by that of Baha'u'llah. The beloved Guardian has noted that Baha'u'llah is the ark of human salvation. The youth that were speaking here earlier touched upon a critical point, and which is really the essence of the entire problem for youth and adult, and that is that of meaningless and a lack of purpose. And without those, they are, as Daniel Jordan has noted, meaningless is the characteristic hallmark, perhaps the dominant symptom of the collapsing world order. Without purpose and meaning, we become like the animal. And as Daniel Jordan stated, socially irresponsible. So therefore, I'm going to briefly go into 7 principles which in part intertwine. However, 7 principles that if I adhere to, we will be well on the way to a utopia of a crime-free society. In that I believe that there's an inverse relationship between adherence to these principles and that of criminal conduct. The first one is that of the family. The family is basically regarded as the basic unit of society. Therefore, it only stands to reason that with the breakdown of the family, there will be a consequent breakdown of society itself. There has been a debate when I heard over this week here as to the family, and there was debate was, is the family dead? There's no sense in trying to go back to what was traditionally known as the family. But it was noted that while the family might be changing in its form, that is from the way we have a tendency to regard the family since approximately the last 200 years, whereas the father is a dominant figure and looked upon as being oppressive, the women subordinate, and children without thought. And the family is, of course, the backbone of society. And again, it just stands to reason that with the breakup of the family, there will be a following breakup of society itself. Abdul-Baha has made some rather stern comments in that regard. He noted that the mother and father must attempt all effort to train their children, and he noted that should they neglect this matter, they shall be held responsible and worthy of reproach in the presence of the stern Lord. And he further noted, this is a sin unpardonable. That's pretty strong. So the principle of the family recognizes the responsibility of the parents. However, there must be conditions to facilitate this bond, etc., within the family unit. And that there were some persons speaking this week who are from developing countries, and they were noting that it's very difficult to maintain the family units in society where there's no money, there's war, and so forth, and so on. So, in addition to the responsibility of the parents, there's a joining responsibility of society as well to ensure there are, in fact, conditions in which that can be done. The second principle, justice. In defining justice, there has been a great deal of philosophical debate, Rawls, Banner, etc., and even back Socrates and so forth, as to just what is the nature of justice. Baha'u'llah has noted, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. He further said, the light of men is justice, quenching not with the contrary winds of oppression and tyranny. The purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among people. The principle of justice is that justice is the only foundation to social order. There's at times an ill assumption that laws are made to be just, which we know is not, shall we say, always the case. For instance, years ago in this country, which has progressed, it was against the law to teach blacks how to read and write. So in regards to justice, it should be applied regardless of race, ethnicity, sex, or one's social status. The next principle is that of education. And as we all know, that education is a compulsory factor in the faith, and that we should attempt to educate all. Abdu'l-Baha has noted that education makes the ignorant wise, the tyrant just, promotes happiness, strengthens the mind, develops the will, and makes fruitless trees of humanity fruitful. Again, Abdu'l-Baha stated, the primary and most urgent requirement is the promotion of education. It is inconceivable that any nation should achieve prosperity and success unless this paramount, this fundamental concern is carried forward. Dr. Carr has noted moral education is the basis of character, and character is destiny. In that, in the realm of education, we need to be sensitive that moral and academic education should be there should be a balance there, and that the thing of paramount importance to education is character training. In a statement by the International Baha'i Community to the United Nations, they noted it is conscience which is largely responsible for preventing the non-criminal majority of humankind from engaging in crimes either against individuals or society at large. The next principle, economic distribution. Yeah, that almost goes really without saying, just as they all do. And that brings up a point. This friend who I was sharing the faith with, as most people say, they have the principles of the faith defined. People generally agree that the principles are logical and so forth. Abdu'l-Baha has noted that an individual seeking to further his own petty and personal concerns will block the advancement of the entire people. The principle of economic distribution then contends that as long as there are these great polarities, extremes between wealth and poverty, there will always be social unrest, hence crime. The next principle is that of the work ethic. Baha'u'llah has noted, work, voluntary or paid, when done in a spirit of service to the betterment of mankind, is equivalent to that of worship. The principle of the work ethic supports the premise that all work is in fact meaningful. Thus, The principle of the work ethic contends that employment should be available to all people. I'm going through these kind of fast, but because of time. The next principle is that of community participation. Community participation is essential to any effort to resolve the crime problem. This is something that I've heard over and over and over, and the research has indicated is that there has been a tendency to exclude the community or persons who don't have the position to influence from the decision-making process itself. To injustices, Abdul-Baha noted that these deficiencies have resulted from the total absence of a unified public opinion and the lack of zeal and resolve and devotion in the country's leaders. Punishment is the final principle. Punishment is unfortunately a necessity. Abdul-Baha has in fact stated that there are two sorts of retributory punishments: vengeance and chastisement. Further, he states, man has not the right to take vengeance, but the community has the right to punish the criminal. So punishment, therefore, is one of the essentials of our society. Baha'u'llah has written, O people of God, that which traineth the world is justice, for it is upheld by two pillars, reward and punishment. These two pillars are the sources of life to the world. And punishment, without saying, is a subject of much debate as to its purpose, whether it is that of deterrence or retribution, isolation, and so forth and so on. And this debate ensues now. But while punishment is undoubtedly and unfortunately needed, it is sometimes a means through which society can escape the complex social problems that are in fact there. In fact, in some instances, as they refer to today's youth, in the fair state of New Jersey, for example, they are in fact lowering the age of responsibility to age 14. So we are saying that today's youth, as they said, they are vicious. They are simply uncontrollable. You can't do anything with them. But there's a serious problem there, and I think the problem that we have had with our system in general is that it assumes that the individual is in fact sick and that society is in fact okay. So we aren't going to focus on society. We are going to focus on that of the individual, which is an inherent problem. Prisons. Well, we can go on about prisons too. Abdul-Baha has written, they build prisons, make chains and fetters, arrange places of exiles and banishment, and different kinds of hardships and tortures, and think that by these means to discipline criminals, whereas in reality they are causing destruction of morals and perversion of characters. Mannheim, this goes way back to the 1800s, noted that prisons are nothing more than a university for criminals. And what has been the answer is that we should build more of them. Not to take a position on that. In one state, I'm not going to call it names. It doesn't matter, though. They are building 2 new prisons now at the cost of $50 million each to house 500 people. You know, you can pay me $50,000, pay them $50,000, taxes both. But from a perspective of the international community, there isn't that tendency to incarcerate. However, in some countries there are. And then that brings up to that of punishment. Klein has noted that punishment without the provision of alternative behaviors is insufficient. You incarcerate someone, you put them in a prison, and they come back out, and then put them back in the same environment. You know, and there's why don't people do more in prison to benefit themselves? I don't know how many people have ever visited a prison. The objective, the primary objective, is not necessarily one of education or preparing for the outside. It's one of survival. Doing time. Thus, Baha'i has proclaimed, soon will the present-day order be rolled up and a new one spread out in its stead. I was very, very impressed by the 2 youth here speaking because they touch upon many of the problems in which society is faced with, primarily a lack of meaning and a lack of purpose. In accepting the bounty and blessings of God, Baha'is, those of us who have acknowledged the faith, in addition to accepting that responsibility, that bounty and blessing, we have accepted a responsibility, an inherent responsibility to advance the whole of mankind. That may seem, it sounds basic, but I wonder, at times, do we really know the extent, the weight of that level of responsibility? We talk of entry by troops and mass conversions, and not even to ask the question of, are we ready? I would yet ask, are we getting ready for this entry? There are serious problems. Again, I refer to the youth, talk here, drugs. That's been a subject. What is to be done about drugs? It's a widespread problem. And again, I refer to the youth. I think there's nothing more challenging than to be a youth in this day and time. The youth are being devalued as we go into this high-tech society. What is, in fact, the role of youth? And I think that that's critical. As far as the drugs and so forth, that we address the issues of youth, or there will be no tomorrow. And I have very strong feelings about the delinquency problem, and it's not a problem unique to this country. It's a problem for most of the international community. what chance does a youth have when they get out of school to find some type of employment? You have people that have PhDs that are here looking. How come? Where's the future? And again, as we are going into a high-tech society, there's a perceived less need for youth. And we all know that our most valuable resource is that of human resources. What are we going to do with them? I suggest then that it is essential, and again, essential, that we develop institutions to deal with the pressing needs and problems of mankind, juvenile delinquency and drugs and so forth. What do we in fact do about it? What will we do about it now? I recommend then that this association, through its wisdoms, as it has developed with the International Health Agency, develop an International Institute of Criminal Justice. Whether it be called that is beside the point. But the thing is to generate some type of cooperative engagement of the international community, and with the inclusion of youth as a major, as a component, as a valuable component in that. And secondly, in that participation has been a major shortfall of our of systems, in that there's been a tendency not to include the community in the decision-making process. I think that's beginning to change because of media and so forth and so on. But community participation in any institution or any program of the Baha'i faith or any other body should in fact allow an active means for community participation. And as a footnote to that, while academic degrees is fine, part of the overall order is that there has been an exclusion of people because of lack of academic degrees and so forth and so on. And I hope we don't incorporate that into the New World Order. Thank you.